Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to this video. And today I've gathered for you a few terrifying Reddit stories. So, if you like them and want to contribute to my goal of getting to 1000 subscribers before October, make sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications. So, yeah, enjoy.
Fred, the vampire from my work.
Submitted by Marinero Ron. I saw someone else post a true story here, so I thought I would do the same thing. This happened in my hometown of Springfield, Massachusetts. I'm using my boyfriend's account since I don't use Reddit that much, but I thought this would be a good story to share. I'll see if I can post a news article linked to it as well. They even interviewed me for a few podcasts about the whole ordeal. Okay, here it goes. Fred, the vampire from my work. This started around 4 years ago when I had to work evenings at a restaurant called Pocula Sacra. They serve high-end Greek food and had Michelin star ambitions, but never quite got there. This restaurant is next door to a nightclub called Fuzzy's. One day the owner hired this front-end manager named Fred. Fred was really pale and tall and had this long raven black hair that was very full and wavy. It came down to just past his shoulders. To be honest, I was kind of jealous, it was so beautiful. In fact, Fred was rather attractive, at least I thought so at first. He was a little over 6'3" and his eyes were the deepest blue that I've ever seen on a guy. The first evening he started working, I was handling the bar. Fred came over and we started talking and flirting. Fred never once smiled, but seemed very polite. Something about him seemed off. For one, he had this reddish-looking strange scar on his neck. I asked him about it and he said, "Oh, this? That's where I was bitten by a vampire. That's why I must work nights, otherwise I would burn in the sun." I don't know if it was the way he said it in his high-pitched voice or something else, but I was immediately really creeped out by it. Over the next few weeks, I would catch Fred staring at me while I was waiting tables or running back and forth to the kitchen, unashamedly just gawking at me as I tried not to notice him. There is this thing called the halo effect, I think, that sometimes allows attractive people to get away with creepy or bad things. Fred was cute, but absolutely did not have this. He went from slightly creepy to outright creeper over the next few days. One Saturday evening I was off work and shopping at a clothing store in the local shitty mall with my best friend Jessica. We were trying on tops and I needed a different size. Jessica went to grab me one. While I was in the changing room alone, I heard this voice timidly shout my name and ask whether I was in there. It was Fred's squeaky voice. He said he saw me in the mall and wanted to come over and say hello. For some reason, he thought coming to the dressing room and doing this was a great idea. I told him, "Hey Fred, I'm just in here trying on some clothes, I'll be out in a minute." After a few minutes I stepped out and immediately caught him standing right on the other side of the divider curtain that closed off my dressing room. He was waiting for him just inches from where I was standing. I jumped and screamed a little, but for some reason my anxiety forced me to laugh and play it off. I should have yelled and done something, but I didn't. Fred started texting me after that. Really strange texts talking about stuff like wishing me good morning with crying and devil and weird memes that I didn't get. One time he asked me whether I lived alone. I lied and told him that my fiancée lived with me. The next few months was insanity at the restaurant. We lost a few people, including this girl named Bethany who I would sometimes trade shifts with. She suddenly quit and just never showed up back, leaving me to make up for her slack. Fred oversaw hiring but dragged his feet on hiring anyone new. I think he used that opportunity to fill in partially for Bethany so he could be closer to me. I don't know though. It was all very strange. I was already debating quitting at this point. Even though the tips were incredible, I seriously felt unsafe there. I just couldn't put my finger on it, but something about Fred felt dangerous. So that December I had decided to quit, but hadn't told the owner yet. The owner's wife, Cheryl, was having a birthday party one evening at another restaurant that they owned. She invited most of the night staff since it was during the day. We showed up, even Fred, who I saw for the first time in the daylight, briefly. He ran in from outside wearing a blue baseball cap, scarf, and sunglasses, before immediately taking them off upon entering the building. During that party, everyone started to drink a little too much, even though it was the middle of the day. I'd say almost all of us were drunk after an hour or so, even Fred, whose face turned from ghostly pale to reddish and weird. Suddenly there was a pause in the early 2000 music they were playing, and Cheryl asked Fred loudly, who was loosened up a bit and acting silly, whether he had a girlfriend. That creep, with his messed up hair and squeaky voice, smiled and was scratching his neck. Then he looked straight at me while everyone was watching and said this: "No, I just haven't found the right one to sink my teeth into yet." In that weird, high-pitched voice before leaning his head back and passing out on the couch. He obviously had way too much to drink. While his head was leaned back on the couch, everyone could clearly see that the weird scar that he had that was now super red and inflamed. Maybe it was the alcohol, but it looked seriously nasty. I swear I could almost see his heartbeat pulsing in it. Everyone tried to wake him up, but he was totally out. Someone called the EMS, but it took them forever to get there. While we were waiting, someone asked about his scar to me. I told him I had no idea where he got. While we were all looking at it, the weirdest fucking thing that I've ever seen in my life happened. Right there, in the middle of the party, while everyone was looking at him concerned, his red and inflamed vampire bite scar opened and spat out something that hit the floor loudly. It was the grossest thing that I had ever witnessed in my life. Everyone screamed in shock. The paramedics arrived a few minutes later and helped take him to the hospital. They looked at the weird thing his neck spat out, and one of them recognized what it was. I think that's a bullet. They took him to the hospital because he was severely dehydrated and wanted to make sure he didn't have alcohol poisoning. They reported the bullet to the police. Apparently hospitals have a duty to report any gunshot or stabbing to the police. The police investigated it and determined that Fred was involved in the disappearance of Bethany a few months previously. Apparently the bullet from his neck came from the gun of a man who was murdered at his home. The man's wife was taken and was never found. Anyway, they arrested Fred and charged him with the murder of the man named James Mantitus and my coworker Bethany. Although they never found her body, they know he had something to do with it because of some clothing and DNA that they found at the house that he lived with his parents. I don't think I'll get over the sight of seeing his neck spit out that thing. Apparently the body sometimes does that with bullets over time. They said Fred survived because the bullet first went through his arm before entering his neck, like he tried blocking it when he was shot. The police tell me that Fred asks about me all the time, that when he gets out, we'll get married and all this other really creepy stuff. He's in prison for life, but I keep having nightmares that one day he'll escape or that he'll be released for some reason and show up at my door, just like he had when I was in the changing room.
The Strange Passengers.
Submitted by Past Pudding 7160. There is a certain special romance in late, almost nighttime rides on nearly empty buses. When there are only a few passengers left in the cabin and the dim light of the bus lamps illuminates their tired faces. Some of them stayed late at work, while others, on the contrary, are just heading to work their night shift. Some live on the other side of the city, and long trips have become a familiar routine for such people. Workers and revelers, loving couples, and elderly women with seedlings returning from their dachas are all frequent guests of late routes, but quite often you also encounter passengers of a rather strange appearance on such trips. They always board at unlit and deserted stops and immediately choose seats at the back of the bus, trying not to attract too much attention. They can be either men or women. They look quite ordinary and almost indistinguishable from other passengers, but that's only at first glance. If you start to closely examine these passengers, you might notice very strange features like having 6 fingers on their hands or vertical cat-like pupils. Some wear ridiculous headgear, various types of hats, caps, scarves, usually to hide the complete absence of ears. You might say such details should be immediately noticeable, but most people absolutely don't notice them. And even you yourself rarely look at people getting on the bus, especially when all your attention is focused on your smartphone. In such moments, it's hard to notice the person walking past you with 2 left feet. But the problem is, if you start doing this, staring at the people boarding the bus, looking for strange details, you will very soon catch a curious glance in return. They will start to examine you in the same way, and in this case, it's better to immediately try to look away and switch to something else. Start looking out the window, at your phone, or lower your gaze to the floor. And most importantly, never, you hear, never look at a passenger like that in the eyes for too long. Otherwise, you will very soon want to get off at the next stop. Get off together with the strange person. But is it a person at all? Article from Secret World newspaper, issue of 27th of May 2009. A series of strange disappearances began in the city of N. In a short time, more than 24 people went missing without a trace. Local newspaper headlines were filled with reports of an alleged maniac terrorizing the city and recommended staying off the streets in the evening. The police investigation led nowhere. No evidence or bodies were found. It was as if they had vanished without leaving a single trace. The unsuccessful investigation caused a media uproar and led to a series of high-profile resignation and dismissals. Officials from the administration districts lost their seats, and the head of the city police department resigned. He was replaced by an unknown captain at the time, who promptly arrived from the capital with his team of investigators. Soon, they resumed work on the case and began questioning witnesses and studying the investigation materials anew. The new investigators managed to find 2 living people from the list of the missing. One of them was a citizen with rather marginal views who had been registered with the police more than once and apparently was mistakenly included in the list. He was not involved in the disappearances and was accidentally found during a raid on the city's seedy areas and shelters. After being fined for lack of registration, he was released and is of no further interest. The other missing person was directly related to the mysterious disappearances and was discovered by a patrol under mysterious circumstances. Around midnight, the duty station received a call from a local resident complaining about a man wandering around in bloody clothes. The call patrol found and brought the citizen to the city hospital's emergency room, where an examination revealed documents, a wallet with a small amount of money, and a mobile phone. These items, along with the bloody clothes, were taken by investigators for further examination because the man's body showed no signs of injury or violence. The only thing that puzzled the investigators was the mental state of the found man. Poor man was clearly in shock and babbling incoherently about some dark people on a bus who supposedly took his legs. Therefore, he was sent to the city psychiatric hospital where he was diagnosed with schizophrenia and prescribed calming medications and general complex therapy. Soon he began to recover relatively and even managed to answer some of the investigators' questions. But shortly after, his condition noticeably worsened, and 2 weeks later he died in his sleep from heart failure in his ward, leaving behind even more questions. Later examination results showed that the blood on his clothes did not belong to him. Moreover, this blood was not even similar to human blood in composition. According to the attending doctors, in the last days before his death, he was clearly very disturbed by something, was afraid to be alone, and kept rambling that they would definitely find him and take not only his legs, but everything else. During the autopsy, it was found that his muscles seemed to have been gnawed from the inside. The muscle tissue even bore marks similar to human teeth marks. The pathologist attributed this to developmental pathology, but stated that he had never seen anything like it before. The man was buried in one of the city cemeteries in the presence of a small number of relatives. At the moment, it remains unknown who is behind all these mysterious disappearances. Law enforcement agencies refuse to comment on this matter. The newspaper's editorial office recommends exercising caution and avoiding unnecessary outings in the late evening. Article from Secret World newspaper, issue of 2nd July 2009. Not long ago, we received a letter with a rather interesting case. The text contained many errors and is presented here in a slightly edited form, but the editorial office openly states that, aside from this, no changes were made. Moreover, the editorial staff is confident that the case described in the letter is directly related to the disappearances of people. Hello, your regular reader is writing to you. A strange incident happened to me last week. I was returning from work. It was already late evening. I got on an empty bus, took a seat in the back, and almost no people around, and I was dozing off in one eye. Suddenly, at the next stop, a guy gets on and sits down right across from me. There are plenty of seats in the cabin, but he sits directly opposite me. and he starts staring in a very unpleasant way. He's dressed in some rags, a silly hat pulled over his eyes, and grinning like an idiot. I'm not a confrontational person, but I can't stand up for myself, so I started looking at him challengingly like, can you handle it? I look and realize the one sitting in front of me isn't human at all. His skin is too pale, all rough, with bulges instead of ears covered by his hat, and his eyes reflect light like a cat's. And immediately I felt very uneasy, couldn't breathe, thoughts in my head thickened, couldn't understand anything. I knew one thing: at the next stop, I had to get out and catch my breath. But I was paralyzed, staring at this strange guy. Then he suddenly got up and headed to the other end of the cabin, where some man was also dozing off. He approached him, looked at him intently, and the boss was already pulling up to the stop, slowing down. Then the doors opened, and this strange guy got out, and that man followed him. I looked out the window, and they were standing at the empty stop, staring at each other. The bus started to leave, but I kept looking out the window, and suddenly they disappeared. The stop was completely empty. Did I imagine it or dream it? I hadn't been drinking that day, but then already at home I couldn't sleep all night. Felt very bad. I don't stay late at work anymore, and I don't recommend it to others. I think I was very lucky then. I'm quite thin, and that man who got off at the stop with the strange guy was plump and stout. Maybe that's what attracted the attention of the strange person. From the editorial staff, the case is, of course, very interesting. We receive hundreds of letters every month with such various cases of abductions by aliens, ghosts, and similar entities. We do not want to refute the truthfulness of such stories and fully trust our readers because our newspaper issues are only responsible with your help. However, regarding this case, we contacted law enforcement to find out if anyone matching the description had gone missing recently. And indeed, in the list of missing persons this month was a man of short stature and stout build. We sincerely ask the unknown reader who sent this story to contact us immediately. The newspaper's editorial staff will keep you updated on all further developments in upcoming issues.
My husband cheated on me. Ever since I found out, he's been acting different.
Submitted by Horror Junkie 123. Justin and I had been together for 10 years, married for 6. I'd been with him for my whole adult life. We'd been dating since I was 17 and he was 18. I always thought he was my soulmate, the man I wanted to grow old with. Turns out, I was wrong. I was devastated when I found out. Yes, Justin had been staying out later than usual. His explanations were usually flimsy at best. I'm not stupid. I had my suspicions, but I think I just really didn't want to come to terms with the fact that my husband was seeing another woman. Honestly, I might have gone years without discovering the truth, but Justin got sloppy. Welcome home, honey. Fun night out with the guys after work again? Uh-huh, Justin grumbled, brushing past me. I made dinner if you're hungry. Beef tips and rice. I know it's one of your favorites. Ate at the bar. I'm going to bed, he muttered, steadying himself against the wall before woozily clumping up the stairs. My heart sank. Nights like those were becoming more and more frequent. I loved my husband. All I wanted was to spend a little quality time with him after a long day at work, but he couldn't even spare me a few minutes. I glanced up at him as he lumbered up the steps, a tear trickling down my cheek. In an instant, any sadness that I felt was replaced with burning rage, because when Justin passed underneath the overhead light, I saw what appeared to be a hickey on the side of his neck. A cocktail of emotions swirled within me. Despair, resentment, betrayal. They all hit me like a ton of bricks. I was stunned. I didn't know what to do. I mean, who would? The man I had been head over heels for all that time had stabbed me in the back. I was in disbelief. Stumbled to the kitchen, pulling out a chair before I could collapse. I stared into space, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. I sat there for a long time, deep in thought. After a while, I felt numb, like my entire personality had been flushed down the drain, leaving nothing but an empty husk. Then a thought flashed across my mind. I'd been mistaken. That had to be it. Just a mere trick of the light. It was a pretty dimly lit hallway after all. Whatever the case, I had to know. I tiptoed upstairs, abandoning my dinner. I crept up to our room as quiet as a church mouse, before lightly pushing open the bedroom door. Justin was fast asleep. I didn't waste any time. I rushed across the room, careful to avoid any squeaky floorboards, and I inspected Justin's neck. His snores grew louder as I approached. He always was a heavy sleeper. I cursed when I got a closer look. Justin was sleeping on his side, and I was not going to try and roll him over. I glanced around, searching for anything that might provide concrete evidence. My eyes fell to the bedside table. Bingo. I snatched Justin's phone from his charger. I held my breath as I pressed his meaty thumb onto the screen to unlock it. I grinned, feeling a rush of exhilaration as I achieved my goal. What? I froze. Justin groggily opened his eyes as a sliver as my hand hovered over him. My blood turned to ice, and I prayed with all my might that my husband would just go back to sleep. To my immense shock, my prayers were answered. Justin mumbled incoherently under his breath before grabbing a fistful of covers and nodding off. I'd escaped by the skin of my teeth. I had to be more careful. The first thing I did was check Justin's text. I immediately saw a woman's name I didn't recognize. My heart shattered when I read the messages. Hey baby, last night was incredible. See you again after work today? You're damn right. I wish you never had to leave. What about that wife of yours though? When she gets suspicious? Her? Not a chance. Even if she finds out, she won't leave. I could murder a baby in front of her and she'd still think I was a saint. Deep-seated rage bubbled within me. Did Justin really think that little of me? He clearly saw me as nothing more than a spineless, codependent pushover. Well, I'd show him. I screenshotted the evidence, scrolling through dozens of nude photos that I hadn't taken, and sent everything to my number. I deleted any proof of my stooping, then replaced Justin's phone on the charger. I stormed out of the room, grabbing my keys as I went. I made it halfway across the living room and the realization hit me. I had nowhere to go. All my family lived 7 hours away. It was too late to book a decent hotel, and I really didn't want to drag any of my friends into my drama. Not yet, at least. That left me with one option. I had to sleep on the couch. I plopped down onto the sofa and sighed. I didn't want to have to confront it, but I knew what I had to do. In the morning, I was going to find a lawyer and start the divorce process. The thought alone was enough to break me. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. I cried like a baby, silently sobbing into a scratchy pillow for what must have been hours. My eyes were puffy by the time I was done. I couldn't fathom falling asleep in a state like that, but I must have at some point, because the next thing I remember, sunlight was flooding through the blinds. Morning, babe, how do you... The rest of the sentence caught in my throat. That was right. Justin and I were about to be over. I grabbed my phone from the coffee table, tears stinging at the corner of my vision. I opened up the text I'd sent myself as proof that the past 12 hours hadn't been some twisted nightmare. But the messages were gone. My eyes grew wide as I stared at the screen. That couldn't be right. They'd been there, clear as day, the night before. Something wasn't adding up. I suddenly paused, bolting upright. Was that breakfast? The tantalizing aroma of eggs and bacon wafted around the corner from the kitchen. My brows furrowed. Justin never cooked. My breathing was shallow as I tentatively shuffled toward the kitchen. Curiosity gnawed at me like a piranha. I apprehensively peeked around the corner, unsure of what I would find. To my shock, there was my husband, humming a little tune while flipping pancakes. I rubbed my eyes. Was I seeing things? Surely I was delusional from lack of sleep. That had to have been it. Then Justin turned, his icy blue eyes locking onto mine. Morning, princess. I hope you're hungry. Saw you sleeping on the couch and I thought you might not be feeling well, so I decided to make you a hot meal to help you get better. My heart skipped a beat. Was this really my husband? It looked like him. Sounded like him too. Still, I was wary. Yeah, just feeling a little under the weather is all. Are you feeling okay? You're acting different. Never been better. Honestly, I think I've really turned a new leaf, he said, placing a steam plate before me. The old Justin's kaput. From now on, I swear, I'm going to be the best husband I can be. Our gazes connected, and I searched his expression for answers. He seemed genuine. If this was an act, it was a damn good one. Thanks, babe. That really makes me happy to hear. Justin beamed at me. the warmth of his smile seeping into my heart. It had been years since he looked at me like that. Well, get used to it because I'm keeping my word. I love you, Lydia. I wanted to be suspicious. I wanted to remain silent. I wanted to keep my guard up. But how could I? All I needed was love and attention, and I was finally getting it. For the first time in a long time, it felt like my husband actually cared. I love you too, Justin, I muttered before digging into my meal. A big part of me was still leery of my husband. His timing was pretty convenient after all, but even with all my doubts, Justin was seemingly sticking to his promise. He took me out on dates, paid to get my nails done, bought me flowers. He even started shouldering most of the housework. Needless to say, I was impressed. If he would have kept that up, I might have never suspected a thing. But one night, he slipped up. We were cuddled up on the couch watching The Truman Show, and I asked, "Now, I wish I would have kept my mouth shut." "Hey, babe." "Yes, my love," Justin asked, his eyes still glued to the screen. If someone close to you was an imposter, like a perfect replica except for a few tiny changes, do you think you'd notice? Justin tensed up, his eyes wide as he slowly turned to face me. A blank stare had overtaken his expression. A chill rippled through my body when he looked at me like that. He was beginning to frighten me. "I suppose so. Why do you ask?" His voice was monotone, dripping with a tinge of urgency. I didn't know how to process his sudden shift in personality. "It's the premise of the movie we're watching." I watched as the color seeped back into his face, and he loosened up, breathing a sigh of relief. I cocked a curious brow. Why was he acting so strange? That makes sense. We sat there in uncomfortable silence, shifting our attention back to the TV screen. After a few more tense moments, I couldn't take it anymore. "I've got to use the restroom and charge my phone. I'll be right back. No need to pause the movie for me." Justin nodded before grinning up at me. His smile. Had his teeth always been that straight? "Okay, baby girl, hurry back. Wouldn't want your spot to get cold." "Yeah, sure thing." I practically bolted up the stairs, locking myself in our room. I slumped against the door, trying to steady my palpitating heart. What was going on? Was it just me, or was that some seriously freaky behavior? Either way, I needed a second to calm down. I had my eyes shut, focusing on my breathing, when I heard it. My phone was buzzing from inside my pocket. I hurriedly retrieved it, glancing at the screen. Unknown number. I normally don't answer calls from strangers, but something compelled me. Maybe it was intuition, or perhaps I just wanted someone to talk to other than my husband. In the end, I accepted the call. Hello? Lydia? Lydia Atkins? Speaking. Look, this is going to sound crazy, but I needed to hear what I have to say. Okay. I suddenly jolted up from my spot on the floor and stared at the locked door separating me from the hallway. Loud knocks rattled in its frame. Lydia, who are you speaking to?" Panic surged through me as I scrambled for an answer. It's my mom. Go back downstairs. I'll be there in a minute." "That was him, wasn't it?" the caller said. "That was my husband, yes. Why do you ask?" I whispered, putting as much distance between myself and the door as possible. "Lydia, I need you to hear me out. Can you promise me that you will?" The pounding on the opposite side of the room grew even louder. "Lydia, don't listen to her. She's a fucking liar." My stomach began to twist itself into knots. How did he know? "I'm listening. I'll hear what you have to say." The woman on the other end of the line breathed an audible sigh of relief. "Okay, my name is Adeline, and Justin and I have been seeing each other for about 9 months. The man in your house is not your husband." My blood turned to ice, and I began to tremble. No, that couldn't be true. In a shaky voice, I asked the question that will haunt me until I die. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" There was a long pause. The bangs outside my door were reaching a nauseating crescendo. When Adeline answered, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was in serious danger. "Lydia, for the past week, Justin has been living with me."
Till this day, I still had no idea who she is.
Submitted by ThinkWorker2446. A fair warning before I start, English isn't my first language, so expect some grammatical errors. And this is gonna be a very long story. Alright, let's get to the most crucial part of the story. I'm from Southeast Asia, Indonesia to be exact. In Indonesia, especially in secluded areas or villages, old-time beliefs are still very much alive. By old-time beliefs, I mean things like shamans, black magic and possession, etc. These topics are extremely common here. Heck, even the police sometimes rely on ghost possession to solve murder cases. There's a cold case that got reopened involving a girl named Vina who was murdered. Her spirit supposedly latched onto her best friend and told the police everything. Some Indonesians, especially from the modern generation, laugh at this case because, haha, it's 2024 and the police still believe in that stuff. It's also pretty common here for people to visit witch doctors to get rich, find love, or stay young. In fact, I know more than 5 people who have visited a well-known witch doctor. With these examples, you can get an idea of how many Indonesians feel about paranormal topics. Not everyone, but some. Alright, with that out of the way, here's the actual story. I met a girl named Lela in my freshman year of school. She's cheerful and nice, extremely sweet to me, and we eventually became best friends. We always sat together, told stories, went out on weekends, typical teenage stuff. Fast forward 3 years, and we're in our senior year together. We came up with a plan to have a sleepover at her house. Here's the thing, Lela's house is pretty far from school, in a village. It's not a primitive village, they have water, internet, phones, Wi-Fi, etc. But the travel time from the city, where I live and where our school is, to her place takes hours. We have to go through a long road surrounded by trees. But hey, it's our senior year and this might be the last time we see each other before college, so why not? We agreed that I'd visit her on Wednesday. I'll still remember the date. 7 June 2017. She clearly told me to come before Maghrib. Don't know, Maghrib prayer is one of the 5 mandatory prayers in Islam, said after sunset. If I'm wrong, forgive me. I'm not Muslim, but coming from one of the biggest Muslim countries, I know the basics. Maghrib time, after sunset, is often associated with ghosts. Many mothers tell their children to come home before Maghrib because it's believed that ghosts roam among the living during that time. At that time, I had no idea why she said that, but being young and dumb, I just nodded. When the day came, I asked my father to take me to Lela's house and he agreed, but we hit a problem. We got stuck in traffic for so long and we weren't even halfway there yet. To cut the story short, we finally reached the village entry, though it still needed a few more minutes to get to the actual village. At the entry, I remember there were 2 separate roads, the right road and the left road with this huge tree. To make it even creepier, it was already dark outside. There were no buildings or village houses nearby yet, and the only light source was from my car lights. The only sound was my car too. This tree I'm talking about, in Indonesia we call it beringin, but in English it's referred to as a banyan tree. In Indonesia, the banyan tree is also associated with ghosts and paranormal activities, mainly because of its huge branches and all. Continuing with the story, we ended up choosing the left road because Lela told me before the way to her village is to take the left road, the one with the tree. I swear the ride from that point on felt longer than the traffic earlier, which was odd because Lela said from that tree should only take about 20 minutes to reach the village houses, but it took longer than that. At the time, I didn't think much of it, so I just played with my phone, letting my father drive. A few moments later, he asked me something quite weird. How many banyan trees do we have to pass? At that point, I was confused as my dad. Lela told me there would only be 1 banyan tree, but according to my dad, we passed the same tree more than 4 times. So he asked me for clarification. I told him there's only 1 banyan tree we should be passing. He stayed quiet for several minutes. Completely quiet. Then he suddenly told me to start praying. I was extremely confused, but I did as I was told. I come from a religious family, so that explains his reaction. Thank goodness, after I finished praying, it took about 15 minutes for us to finally reach the village. We started seeing the houses and all. To make this quick, I arrived in front of Lela's house and knocked on her door. When she opened it, she was very surprised to see me, but not in a good way. I couldn't understand why. Remember when Lela said to come before Maghrib? Well, it was already past Maghrib. Heck, It was nighttime already. She let me in because there was no way she would tell me to go back. Now, this is where the real horror starts. Hell, I can still feel the fear as I'm writing this. I'll definitely need to sleep with the light on tonight. I remember her house wasn't as big or luxurious as others I've been to. It was small but comforting, and it felt extremely warm inside. She showed me the bedroom and helped me put my stuff away, yada yada yada. Finally, we decided to watch some TV. A little note, she was home alone at night. Before I came, of course. After a while, she told me she'd go check the kitchen for some snacks. I nodded and sat there, switching channels on the TV. This is the part that sent chills down my spine. I will never forget that day. She took a very long time in the kitchen. I was wondering what was taking her so long. But after a few minutes, she came back and I noticed something off about her. Her hair was a bit messier. She looked different, paler. I don't know how to describe her expression. Anyway, she sat down next to me without saying anything, as she didn't bring any snacks as she promised. So I was like, where are the snacks? You promised to bring some. She looked at me and smiled while nodding her head in an odd manner before patting her stomach. I was like, you ate the snacks without me? She smiled again and looked at the TV without saying anything. At the time, we were watching a quiz show where the winner gets to take home a lot of money. There was nothing funny happening, but Lela suddenly turned to me and laughed. It was harmless, soft little laugh. I was wondering why she was laughing because nothing peculiar was happening in the show. She was usually a very serious person and didn't laugh at movies much. But then she suddenly stopped laughing and looked back at the screen. A few minutes later, she looked at me again and laughed. Louder this time. I was so confused, so I asked her what was wrong, but she didn't say anything. She kept laughing and looking at me, then back at the screen, then at me again, and then the TV. She continued doing that for several minutes, so I laughed along with her, thinking she was just being goofy. Then she stood up from the sofa and stood in front of me, blocking my view of the TV. I gently pushed her away with my feet, asking her to move, but then, while still laughing, she did the wheel pose right in front of me, still facing me. I remember feeling weirded out and confused. I wasn't scared at the time because I didn't really believe in ghosts or possession, so I asked her why she was doing that, holding a nervous laugh myself. I really wanted to capture a video of her, but then she walked away to the kitchen, still in that position and still laughing. The kitchen was dark, and from the living room you couldn't see inside. The last thing I heard was her faded laughter before complete silence. I remember waiting there for 5 or 10 minutes before standing up to check on her. Suddenly my phone rang in my pocket, so I picked it up. When I saw the name, I was even more puzzled because it said Lela was calling me. So I yelled out loud, asking her why she was calling me when I was right there and she was in the kitchen. She could have just come and told me. So I picked it up, and the voice on the other end was indeed Leila's. She asked if I could open the gate in front of her house to let her in since she was on her motorcycle and too lazy to get down. I asked her what she meant by that and how she got out so quickly. She sounded clueless and said she didn't understand what I was talking about. Just told me to open the gate since she was already close by. So I did. Still confused, I went out and opened the gate as Lela came in, holding bags of snacks. I heard the story about her crawling to the kitchen and all that, and she told me a completely different story from her point of view. Let's rewind to the part where she went to the kitchen to grab us some snacks. According to my point of view, as you just read, I was switching channels while waiting for her to get back from the kitchen, right? But according to her, after she went to the kitchen and found no snacks, she decided to buy some from a nearby store. As she walked out of the kitchen, she saw me sitting on the sofa, staring blankly at the TV. When she asked what snacks I wanted and if I wanted to come along, I just stared at the TV and shook my head in silence. That's why she left alone to get some snacks. But I told her she never asked me that, and I never stared blankly at the TV. The first time I saw her was when she walked outside and sat down. In the end, we checked the kitchen and found nothing, no sign of breaking in, nothing. To this day, we promised not to talk about it again. And we are still friends, till now. To this day, I'm still asking myself, if the real Lela was the one who asked me to open the gate, then who was the one sitting with me for over an hour? My friends that had been told about this story said that it has something to do with the banyan tree and how maybe there is a ghost there. And it followed me all the way because I did came after Maghrib, and not listening to Leila's words at all. But I don't know. So yeah guys, hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, leave a like, maybe even subscribe to show your support. And by the way, if you have an interesting story like this, make sure to leave it down in the comments, and if it's interesting enough, I'll even feature it in a future video. So, have a good one. Peace.